Rabbi, you want to?
As long as I have a chair, I don't care which one it is.
Rabbi, will you say something?
Would it help if I unmute first?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Maybe go back to mute.
Okay, I'm going to check something.
Sensitive microphone.
No. Then, yes, right.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh my goodness, hello. I can listen over there.
This is your.
Oh, that's me?
Wear that.
Well, just kidding.
Should I? You want to? This is on me. Okay. So there's a certain way to put that on.
Okay.
Rabbi's phone. So.
You can have it.
Okay.
Not loops in here.
Like that?
Yeah, but you bring it. No. It comes around your ear. It comes this way, not up here.
I have no idea what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Organizing for the second round.
Okay.
Okay.
There.
Am I the second one or the third one?
I'm the second.
You're the third one.
All right, so let's try. I'm going to unmute you. Let's try it. Would you like to say something?
Here I am. Hello. Check.
Oh.
Is this on or? Here it is.
Talk more.
Hello.
Check. Here I am talking.
Okay.
So you can leave that on. And I
Okay.
will mute it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I will do my best. I'll probably not forget. Exactly. But you have extra? You have one more of those? That
This.
Not for
Well-
beginners.
yeah. What is the study sheet?
Oh, the study sheet. I wasn't sure what you were looking for.
A study sheet.
Here.
You
have
know
one.
what? You don't
Otherwise, my email board is
That
could be bad.
hopefully your microphone will be
Muted.
next time.
Yes. All right, I'm going to rename it to you.
Okay, I had 45. So you may have it.
I have more. Should I go?
Well, let's see, it's right there. It's there.
What's this?
You see it's being passed around.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. Why don't we just pass some in this direction and see what happens? Would you like what? It is different from the packet with the blue line.
Turn the air conditioner.
Say what it is.
Okay, let's do 2 minutes of Pennsylvania, guys. Jerry, Lois. Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of Pennsylvania.
I figured I'd say a word. Figure it out. Welcome to we decided to try this year something that I know our congregations haven't done for a few years now, and be together. So we are thrilled to welcome congregations Sinai and Shalom into our building here at Congregation Emmanuel. For those that don't know, I'm Rabbi Jessica Borowski, and we are going
to delve into this. I'll let you introduce, but I guess in brief, everybody should have 2 different packets. This one with the blue stripes, I think you got on your way into the sanctuary, and then one that looks like this, which got passed around once you were already in this room. If you're missing one or the other, let us know, and we will get you the one that you need. We're going to, just to make things interesting, kind of go back and forth a bit between the 2 packets this evening. So we'll let you know where we are as we go.
So now, hello, David, are you starting? Are you going to say yes?
Good evening, everyone. Tonight marks the beginning of the annual fast day of Tisha B'Av, which is in fact the longest fast on the entire calendar, including Yom Kippur. It principally mourns the destruction of the 2 ancient temples that stood in Jerusalem that were torn down many millennia ago. Over time, a series of other calamities, Jewish calamities, occurred on the same day or have been combined with other tragedies to be commemorated on this day. This year is the first Tisha B'Av after October 7th, and many Jews have drawn parallels between the tragedies of history and the present. Some have even in the last days indicated a fear that Iran might choose Tisha B'Av to attack Israel. And some worry that the lessons Jewish sages drew from the destruction of the temple, the Second Temple in particular, that infighting among Jews led to their destruction, are not being heeded adequately today. Tonight we are going to study some excerpts from the book of Jeremiah, the prophet, We'll have the opportunity to hear our cantors chant from the book of Lamentations, known in Hebrew as Echa. Jeremiah himself witnessed 3 waves of attacks. He watched the destruction as the Babylonians came into the southern kingdom. The exile happened with the first deportation in 605 BCE, which included Daniel and his 3 friends. The second wave happened in 597 BCE, which would have included Ezekiel and others. Then the third and final deportation was in the year 586 BCE, which would have affected him directly. That's when the city was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, and the people were carried away in chains. To be sure, we can't overlook the fact that this year saw a tragedy of historic proportions as Hamas engaged in a bloodbath on Israel's southern border, invading kibbutzim, towns, and cities, and even murdering participants at a rave concert, killing over 12,000 and kidnapping more than 200 others and taking them as hostages back to Gaza. Our textual exploration tonight will really be focused on the question, how can we muster a sense of hope at a time where so many things seem to be going off the rails? And we are not, I guess you might expect, the first people to have asked this question. It was something that was on the mind of the prophets, it was on the minds of the rabbis, and we'll have a chance to glean from their wisdom as we move forward.
And we're about to sing Eli Tzion. This is a lament that expresses the sorrow and pain over the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. It's written in the voice of Zion herself, mourning the loss of her children and the desolation of her cities. The words of this kinah, this lament, are filled with imagery that evokes the suffering and the spiritual longing for redemption. And although its exact origins are not completely clear, Eli Tzion is believed to have been composed in the late medieval period, possibly around the 15th century. While in the past it has been attributed to Yehuda Halevi, modern scholars generally consider this to be very unlikely. Traditionally, we chant Eli Tzion towards the end of Tisha B'Av, often as one of the final kinot of the day, and it encapsulates the collective grief of our people, serving as a poignant reminder of the tragedies of our past and the hope for our future redemption. And Eli Tzion is on page 2 of the, I would say the first of the 2 packets. I guess that's not really clear which one that is.
The one with
but
the
one that
stripes.
looks like this.
The one with the stripes, yeah.
Tisha B'Av packet, yeah. And it was originally an acrostic. It is an acrostic, and we have 2 parts of the acrostic you can see in the verse. The chorus is the Eli Tzion, and you see the Gimel and the Daled. This is the 3rd and the 4th letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and so we're missing the other ones here. But this is a little bit of it. So. Eli Tzion ve'areha memo isha b'tzireha ve'chivtu lach adoratzad al ba'nehu neha Eli galot mesharteh
Continue on, I believe it's the other side of that page, which will be on page 3.
Page 3, yeah.
With the first 3 verses of Eicha, of the book of Lamentations.
Again, an acrostic, and we'll do the first 3 of it. Yeah.
Echa yashva vadad, ha'ir rabat siyam, hayeta kehalamana, rabati vagoyim, sarati bamedinot, hayeta lamas, bachot yivke balayla, v'dimata lecheya, ein la menachem mikol ohavea, kol reha b'geduva, hayula la'oyevim, galata Yehuda meoni, umirov avoda, hi vashva vagoim, lo matza manoach, kol rodefeha hisiguha ben hametzarim.
If you can transfer back to the sheet that actually has the same words on it, that says Lamentations at the top and is set up in the style of a Talmud page.
If you don't have one, raise your hand and I will bring you one. Is there anyone who doesn't have this packet?
It's Barb in the back. The first chapter of Echa begins with Jeremiah lamenting the fall of Jerusalem. He observes the solitude of the city, its desolation, how no one is available to comfort it. The focus is on Jerusalem, on how the enemy callously debased her. Gradually, towards the middle of the chapter, this changes. Jeremiah's focus moves away from the victim, Jerusalem, and towards the perpetrator. Who is responsible for what happened? Well, the obvious proximate cause answer is Babylonia. But Jeremiah did what many thousands of Jews have done before and since, which is to look to God for a reason, for some meaning behind what has occurred. Would you do me a favor and just read out loud the English here, alas? Yeah.
Alas, lonely sits the city, once great with people. She that was great among nations is become like a widow. Princess among states is become a thrall.
When we have readings or somebody other, we should, because for people streaming.
Sorry. Please do.
Alas, lonely sits the city, once great with people. She that was great among
Hold on, this is not on.
Now we go. Where we go? One more time. Alas, lonely sits the city, once great with people. She that was great among nations is become like a widow. The princess among states is become a thrall. Bitterly she weeps in the night, her cheek wet with tears. There is none to comfort her of all her friends. All her allies have betrayed her. They have become her foes.
Thank you. As you can see, that is the first and second verse of Echa, which was just beautifully chanted. And surrounding it are a number of different commentaries. There are some that are ancient, some that are medium ancient, and then some that are much more current. What we're going to do is, given the size of this group, we're going to break up into 10 groups of 6. You may wonder how that's going to work. I have no idea. My suggestion would be to start just with the people around you and sort of make a little bit of a circle or semicircle with your chairs. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then maybe some volunteers from the backbenchers to come and join. But at least put your chairs around enough so that you can actually talk to the people with whom you are sitting. And the goal is to review, we have about 20 minutes to do so, to review the commentaries and then address the question which is at the bottom of the page, which has to do, which you can read, have someone read within the group and then move on and forward. Are you ready? Go.
These chairs are kind of connected. They are movable, but they're connected. So,
Well,
That is true.
yeah, maybe that.
Yeah.
I was told we'd be around the table.
The sanctuary
were?
chairs are the hardest ones to move because they're
The original
connected. They're
conversation
usually
was.
connected-ish. And my microphone is still.
Yeah, so what do you think?
May I join you? Cantor,
think
will you
so.
mute my microphone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Am I on?
I can turn you off if you want. There you go. Did he say 20 minutes on this one? For each one? 20 minutes? Maybe this is. What?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Okay. I have no idea.
Should we start with the question or read the paragraphs?
Well, he said to read it first, and then I always listen to the rabbi.
I didn't even hear it. Starting on the left or the right?
Okay, the word badad appears biblically in two profound negative contexts. First is the case of the leper. He shall dwell alone, his place shall be outside the camp. The second is the opening line of the book of Lamentations. How alone is the city, once thronged with people. The only context in which badad has positive sense is when it is applied to God, for obvious theological reasons.
Everybody, please, we'll have 5 more minutes on this, and make sure you give everyone a chance to respond to the question. So.
Anthony, I think the roast is gonna go on the boat.
Everybody take another minute to just finish up, and if someone would be, a representative from each group, be willing to give a 1-sentence statement about what y'all were talking about. Well, you can't say, don't summarize all of it. How about a point you think that others might not have come up with? Can I have the... Yeah, I know, thanks. Now, and now it's off. I got it. Okay, friends, we're going to start with group number 1, which I've just named group number 1. And please direct your attention and see if you are all relating to similar things.
In our discussion, one of the main themes is that Jews have been feeling alone throughout history.
Okay, we're not going to take a vote on that, but I think that is probably very descriptive. Who is?
We did a lot of soul searching about loneliness, and we mentioned it from elementary school if you didn't have a lot of Jewish kids. We mentioned the blessings of TYG and BBYO because you were suddenly surrounded with people more like you. But then we mentioned the fact that even once you've grown up, gone to a college, and so on, you still come out of that and realize there may be millions of us, but why do I still feel alone? Mm-hmm. There's still the sense of being different.
Thank you. Our next victim.
We had a really wonderful discussion. We talked about feeling lonely sort of as bookends from being the only Jew in a community of non-Jews, which would naturally make someone feel alone, all the way to being with a Jewish community or in a Jewish community, and as a Jew, feeling lonely because the community these days is so divided on so many issues. So as a Jew, feeling alone amongst other Jews for the point of view you might have.
Thank you, very good. Thank you, Chair.
We had a little trouble tying loneliness to the lamentations and the idea of the communities being destroyed. So we focused a little bit more, I think, on what Jews have to be happy about and what to be unhappy about, and the fact that our ancestors, when they came here, came at a very, very difficult time. The ones that came here were the survivors. I think most people didn't make it,
right,
which accounted for some of the orneriness of the people that raised us, because they were the ones that could get out. But anyhow, so we talked about what, say, our great-grandparents were thinking about on Tisha B'Av. They may not have known. They cried. We heard them cry. We didn't know what it was about, but they cried. Whether they all knew all the details of the various dates of the destruction of the temples, etc., not so sure about. But they knew that Jews had been through many bad times in our existence, and this is the day to cry. There's other days to be happy. This is the day to cry.
Great. I don't know if you've had the experience ever of going to a movie that just sets you off and you're crying gallons and not sure what that's all about, because it's a movie that really doesn't have anything to do with your life, per se. I mention that simply because I think, about the Jews you're speaking, I think most people have a lot to be reflecting on in their own experience, but sometimes starting off with a distant experience is an easier way to arrive emotionally there. And I think that's sometimes why, what do I have to do with the temple, et cetera? Well, not as much as personally I have to do with what's going on here, but it's a good starting place to think about the Jewish condition. So thank you. And yes, we did. Well, here, you got to use it. I'm sorry.
We talked about the universality of suffering and our experiences, some of that, and of tying that to loneliness, to theology.
I guess what I would add to that is just that I think we may have taken a slightly different approach to some of the discussions that have been mentioned, in that I think what we were getting at is that the loneliness that people describe as a Jew is actually part of a universe of suffering, that our suffering, we all suffer, every person on earth is going to suffer, and our suffering in many ways is very similar and very connected. And in a way, we isolate ourselves when we define our own suffering as different from the suffering of other groups. And there's a sort of self-imposed exile piece that goes with defining your own suffering as unique. And I think, without sort of explicitly saying this, we were all sharing the fact that that's not where we as individuals would want to go with that thought process, the uniqueness of our suffering. I don't think that as a group we felt that was something we have in our minds. I think it's more about the universality of suffering as a way out of isolation.
Very good, thanks. We, in a conversation we had way over there, we talked about a very thin volume called The Lonely Man of Faith by a rabbi named Soloveitchik, who was a modern Orthodox rabbi, was so well known in the American Jewish community in the 50s and 60s and 70s that if you just said the Rav, meaning the rabbi, everybody knew who you were talking about. And in his book, The Lonely Man of Faith, he makes the case that loneliness actually is a universal experience as well. He says, look, I've got a loving wife, I've got kids, I've got a great community I work with, I've got colleagues, and yet at the end of the day, I'm just by myself. I can't ever fully know another person. So philosophically, there's a real groundedness to this idea as well of it being a universal experience. And it is was there still, who are you pointing to? I did ask them to speak. I didn't want to out them. They had a great experience. They had a great conversation until I went over near them, evidently. So that's what happens. Anyway, I hereby turn you over, not to you, but to Rabbi Phelps.
We're going to do some other. Okay. You are unmuted, yes.
All right. We're actually going to first hear another selection from the Book of Lamentations from our cantors, and then we'll turn to our second page in our source sheet and study that together.
So first we have the song on page 4, By the Waters of Babylon, that we're going to sing together. So, and we've gone over it, so if you kind of can look over here, we'll see what happens. By the waters of Babylon, we lay down and wept. Where's your mic? And wept for thee, Zion. We remember thee, Zion, by the waters of Babylon, by the waters of Babylon. We lay down and wept for thee, Zion. We remember thee, Zion. We remember thee, Zion. And now we turn to page 5, and Cantor Bergwurst will chant the first 3 verses of the second chapter. Echa Ya'iv v'yapo Adonai et bat Zion yishlich mishamayim eretz tiveret Yisrael v'lo zachar Hadom raglav b'yom apo
Bila Adonai velo chamal et kol neot Yaakov haras bievraso mimitzorevat Yehuda higia la'aretz chilel mamlacha v'sareha Gada Bahari Af Kol Keren Yisrael Heshiv Achor Yemino Mipnei Oyev Vayivar B'Yakov Ke'esh lehava ochla sahaviv.
Thank you. We are turning now to our second page in our source sheet. And I think, Elliot, may I volunteer you to read something? I've got the microphone. How would you feel about reading the passage in the middle in the English? Yes, precisely.
All your enemies jeer at you. They hiss and gnash their teeth and cry, "We've ruined her. Ah, this is the day we've hoped for. We have lived to see it."
Thank you. Not a very pleasant passage. Does anybody want to either sum up what it feels like to hear that passage read, or what your understanding of what the sort of plain meaning of that passage is? What are we describing here? What does it feel like? And I'll pass the microphone to anyone who wants to speak. Oh, surely someone has a response. There we go. I think the button got pressed somehow in the process of transferring it. There we are.
I'm not sure if this is what it's supposed to mean, but to me, it feels like any time I look at the news, that it is others jeering at me for something that I might think or believe in, or that's a friend or a neighbor might believe in, or just a person that should be respected. And people not only are jeering at others, but they are taking pride in the breaking down of other humans to bring themselves up.
Yeah. So this notion of jeering and expressing that sort of cruelty to people is feeling unfortunately, very resonant for you in this moment. I can understand that. Is there anyone else who has a thought they'd like to share about this before we go into the other texts and go back to our groups? Yes, please.
The sentence that bothers me, if you will, is, this is the day we hoped for. It's also like they went into this whole thing trying to figure out how to ruin somebody, which in my mind is a horrendous mindset. I mean, to be able to talk to somebody and maybe learn something or have an interaction with them is fine, but going in hoping to see them fall is just yucky.
Yeah, I agree. What's being described here, I think, on its face sounds really ugly and really aggressive. And what's interesting is I'm not sure that all of the commentaries around it read it that way. So what I'd like to invite everybody to do is take a moment back in your groups to look at this text in the context of the three that surround it. I think Rashi in particular is doing something really different with the hissing than I would have expected. So I'll be curious to see if other people feel that way too. But just to take a look at these three texts and see how reading them in conjunction with this passage colors your understanding of what's going on here in Lamentations and how it feels resonant to you in your lives. And you can see lots of questions for discussion at the bottom. So I'll give everybody just a few minutes to discuss that in groups, and then we'll come back and share what we've learned with one another. Go ahead and take just a few more minutes. I think we're going to come back together as a group for a brief discussion at about 8 o'clock. go ahead and share your last thought as we wrap up this portion of our discussion.
This could have been my mistake, but I understood there was going to be a starting song in Tisha, but I didn't realize we were going to be singing.
All right, well, I apologize for interrupting people's conversations, but better that than that we go too long. I'd love it if someone in each group could just share one insight that you think was really interesting that came out of your discussion. So you guys already have a mic. Would you like to start us off?
Go ahead. We are still wrestling with the notion that sometimes you just can't find blame and reasons for horrific things happening, and you can be happy lamentations exist so that you can sit and feel in a safe place your sorrow. But we still wonder what is the answer to why bad things happen to good people, and why it's so easy for human beings to be taught to hate.
Well, I have good news. We're going to answer both of those questions. We're not, but those are incredibly profound questions to be wrestling with and very appropriate for this moment in the calendar.
Thinking about Rodgers and Hammerstein and South Pacific.
Okay.
There's a song in South Pacific about teaching hate and why can't people get along. And one thing about Rodgers and Hammerstein's, they always took a subject, whether it be World War II or in Maine with the carnival, they always found something that was a reason why people behave that way, and how people are taught.
Yeah, generally speaking, when somebody does something cruel or hateful, there's a number of factors that got them to that place, and asking what they are is an important question. Absolutely. Is there somebody in this group who'd like to report back? We're having it. Okay.
Yeah, in our group, we brought this to the present day about Israel's enemies, Hamas in particular, and Hamas's tactics of hiding among the population has caused Israel to kill a lot of innocent people. And that's tarnished Israel's reputation. It used to be considered, a gem of a nation. Now a lot of people accuse it of genocide and all sorts of other negative things. And I can hear Hamas saying, and they don't really care about their people. They were willing to sacrifice them like pawns in a chess game. And I can see them crying, we've ruined her reputation. And it's the day they hoped to live for. So we kind of thought about it in that way.
Yeah, and I can certainly understand that connection, and it's a very, very painful and difficult one, and exactly the sort of thing that we all should be processing with one another on Tisha B'Av. Is there anyone in this group who would like to report anything back? No is an acceptable answer. We have something. Please.
So one of the things we talked about is how Jews are tearing down other Jews, and that we're causing our own destruction.
Yeah, and relating that to the same question of jeering, and yep, absolutely. Is there somebody, is this two groups? I can't tell. But is there somebody over here who would like to contribute a thought? I can't tell who. I see. Yes, great.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
We discussed the idea that we're responsible for our own sorrows, especially in the paragraph on the left, but then on the right, it's more a universal thing, and we come together to lament the sorrows that we cause and that we suffer. I guess that sums it up.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of richness in these commentaries, and there are a lot of different layers of how we can apply these texts. And the one on the bottom right in particular is asking us to do something that's simultaneously, I think, very personal and very communal. And then the one on the left, I think, exactly as you said, is suggesting we have to look to ourselves as well as outward to try to figure out what led to all of this. But it's without trying to map that onto anything other than the destruction of the temple. Yeah, it's difficult to figure out which direction to take with a text like this, and that's why we included the question about what is lost and what is gained if you read it in different ways, because I think you do gain and lose things with every reading. Is there somebody in this group who'd like to comment? Great.
I think we focused on the incongruity between the commentaries with each other and the commentaries and the original reading, that this seems so evil and so unequivocal, and then to think that there are different explanations, different ways of looking at what seems like abhorrent action was just difficult for us to resolve.
I can certainly see that as well. Was anybody kind of caught by surprise, and I'll come back to this group, I promise. Was anybody else sort of caught by surprise by the Rashi here? Because that was, I think, the one that felt hardest to process for me, because I agree that if you read just the words of Lamentations themselves on their face, it sounds like something very, as I said before, something very cruel and aggressive is taking place. Enemies are mocking and rejoicing in the destruction of Israel. And yet Rashi seems to be suggesting that the whistling is not so much about mockery as it is about astonishment at destruction, sort of like when you pass by something, you go, look at that, right? That's the kind of thing people are doing. And after having a conversation with Rabbi Cohen about this, and Cantor Newman and Elliot, I'm thinking, on the one hand, there's something a little bit lighter and easier to digest about that reading, right? Well, they're not whistling because they're whistling in mockery. They're whistling in astonishment at the scale of the destruction, right? And in a way, that's a little gentler, a little easier to process. But in another way, it's just differently painful because it's an acknowledgement that the destruction is so extreme of something that had been so glorious and so important that even people who had no particular emotional connection to that structure could look at it and really feel what had been lost. So it stays really heavy in that sense, but it's heavy in a different way. But I hear you that it may be hard to kind of square that with the plain meaning of the text. But, you know, Rashi often pushes us in those ways. You have a...
I think Rashi wasn't taking a fundamentalist point of view. I think he was leaving it open like Job. I don't know why this is happening.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't want to put a blame to it.
Thank you. Would this group like to comment?
I totally disagreed with Rashi. I thought he was
Fair.
completely wrong given the context. If you're jeering and hissing and gnashing your teeth and jubilating over ruining something and calling it the day you have hoped for, you are not whistling with admiration. You are blowing a raspberry in mockery. And I just totally don't see how he can possibly, get that interpretation. And actually, if you're thinking about Persia, I don't think the second, Persia took down the first temple. The Romans took down the second temple. I don't think the Romans, given the size of their empire, were, that crazy about little Israel that they thought it was something so great that they would whistle with admiration about it. I just totally don't agree.
All right, well, fair enough, and I hope that the provocation of the Rashi allowed you to kind of sharpen those ideas and have a really rich discussion about them, which is, you don't have to, no one is expected to agree with all of these comments, or the hope was just that they would provoke an interesting discussion, so thank you for that. And I think we're going to move on to the next piece in our program, which I believe goes back to our cantors.
Now we will turn to page 6 and sing Eli, Eli together, if you would join me. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam, hachol v'hayam, rish rush shel hamayim, berach hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam, hachol v'hayam, rish rush shel hamayim, berach hashamayim, tfilat ha'adam. Oh God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. So you may have noticed in the other two chapters we've had so far, chapter 1 and 2, there was also an acrostic. It was a single acrostic, one verse starting with Aleph, then the next with Bet and Gimel, and so on. There were 22 verses in that chapter. This is a triple acrostic. If you look at the Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, they all start with Aleph. Aleph, 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 and then Bet, 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 Gimel, Gimel, Gimel. This is a 66-verse acrostic. They're much shorter verses, but it actually employs a different melody as well. We have a Western European melody that we'll start with, and then an Eastern European melody. And so this is chapter 3. Ani hagever oni b'shevet evrato otinag v'hayolach choshech velor ach bi yashuv yahfoch yado kol hayom Bila v'sari ve'ori shibar atzmotai banalai vayakav rosh utla'a b'machashakim hoshivani kimetei olam. Here's the Eastern European. Gadar ba'adi velo etzeh ichbid nechashti gam ki ezak va'ashaveya satam tefilati gadar derachai begazit netivotai iva. There we go.
Thank you. We're going to turn now to the third page in our source sheets. Now, we know that Tisha B'Av, the holiday, is a somber and sad holiday. And just like on Yom Kippur, which is not, most of it is not an uplifting day, but by the end of it, if you come back in the afternoon and for Ne'ilah, it is actually very uplifting and very optimistic. So Tisha B'Av, if we take the entire 24 hours, we get a similar arc where by the end of Tisha B'Av, we start to pull ourselves back up. It's more optimistic at the end as we then start, terrifyingly, but positively, our march towards Rosh Hashanah. So we are gathering together only for this evening, even though the holiday will continue all day tomorrow. And so what we have here on page 3 is that sense of this arc where we actually start to look forward. We're still in Eicha, we're still in the book of Lamentations, but we're starting to pull out some of the more excited and more, maybe not excited, but more forward-looking and optimistic pieces of this text. So the center column, as it has been on the other pages, the center column is a couple of verses from Eicha, and then around it is different commentaries on this verse or this idea. So I'm going to give us just a few minutes in our groups again to read that center text together, and then you don't have to read you can read all of the commentaries, or you can pick one and read that one and look at the questions on the bottom of the page, which we're starting to pull ourselves out. These questions are about hope and kindness. So it starts to sort of get us thinking, even in the midst of a very sad text and holiday, of what we can actually be hopeful about. So take a few minutes, again, in your groups to look at this page. ask everyone to take one more minute for this third page before we come back together.
Grandchildren on college campuses who are being attacked or pointed out. It's very direct. It's something that's actually real.
But what are we doing?
What do you mean, what are we doing?
Outside of words, why? We didn't have to carry signs. We don't have to badger the people who are
No, I'm not
protesting.
talking about
we
that.
have to form a...
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kids that are being...
No, either can. I'm a bit...
Careful, it's a live mic.
That's why you feel this here. I mean, it's Tisha.
Because it's real.
Tisha B'Av is when you're attacked. So is Purim. But, you know...
All right. As we come back together again, the question... I know, that was a short one.
Then we get into Jewish politics.
There's still hope. So the question that I'm going to ask in summary from each group, and maybe even more than one answer from groups, is what is giving you hope? Whether it's in the text or in general, what's something that your group talked about that is giving you hope right now? So I'm going to start over on this group because I don't think you've gone first yet. Jerry?
I think hope is a very interesting concept, very important concept. Hatikva, of course, means hope. There was a psychiatrist many of you have heard of named Viktor Frankl, who survived the camps and wrote a book about what tends to make people survive, and the answer was hope. That was really the essence of his book. So maybe God and hope are almost the same word.
Nice. That's beautiful. Thank you. You want to add another one? All right. We need extra hope. It's great.
I was just mentioning that this was like a 3-page story so far, and there's 1 or 2 more pages coming. And this is the history of our Bible. We were given, we were told what to do, we rejected, we are afflicted, and now we look down and what can we do because we're not happy. And that's what the world is going through right now. Judaism, the United States, Europe, all over the world. But what do we have that's common that makes it easiest for Jews to continue to argue, but as well as to continue to learn and make an answer is our rules, what God has given us.
Yeah.
Whether you're a deep believer, whatever type of believer you are. But those are rules, those are laws that we have that are logical. And are we turning to them now?
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to go this way. Does this group have something? You don't have to.
One of the things we ended up with is someone asked the question, is God there so we have someone to blame? And I asked the counter question is, why do we have to blame anybody for anything? Things happen. What do we do about them? Why does it need to be blamed?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's a great, giant question that I don't think any of us are going to answer tonight, but I like that we're asking them. Anybody over here want to? Mark, you look like you might have something to hope about.
Well, the last song we sang together was the lyrics by Hannah Senish, the Palestinian World War II, parachuted, I believe, into Nazi-held territory. Parachuted into Nazi-held territory, was captured, eventually executed. But this, hope. It is hope, even in that circumstance. And if that is true, remember the title of the Israeli anthem, Hatikva.
Right. Yeah,
the
that's
hope.
what Jerry said. Exactly. Thank you. Does anybody from this, I don't even know, I think you were, I don't know if you're one big group or, well, does anybody want to add, or should I keep going around? All right. Any from this group? Nikki.
First of all, we talk about a new day, and every day is new. You're starting over, and that can give us hope. And that allows us, if we need to make mistakes, we make mistakes, And then, God willing, the next day, we can be absolved of those mistakes. And because God is forgiving. And we also talked about forgiving Nazis. Are they feeling any remorse for what they did? Probably not. So we can't forgive them. But you also see in the media how horrible things happen to people, and those survivors will forgive those people. Are those the people that harm them? Are they being remorseful?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the idea that, because the text talks about pardoning, this idea that can someone be pardoned by God for something horrible? And we talked about that question of, can we forgive someone who doesn't show remorse or who doesn't want necessarily to be forgiven? That was how we got there. Go ahead.
I think one of the things that you brought up is that gives me hope for survival of the Jewish people is that for me, Judaism is a heck of a lot more interesting than it was when I was a child. We're coming together in groups like this, and our synagogues have loads of activities for people of all ages. And this was not true of my synagogue when I grew up. It was just somewhere you went to pray on Shabbat and on the holidays, and junior congregation was really boring. And so, people really didn't participate much beyond their confirmations. And I just see it as a very hopeful sign that synagogues are so vibrant now.
Beautiful. We're not naming names here, people. Thank you. Anyone over here want to share? Sherry.
I take hope from the existence of our people from then until now, that we are still here when other peoples are not. And I see a metaphor for each and every one of us who goes through suffering and comes out the other end and can smile and can cherish a day or appreciate a flower or the birth of a child or any of a number of miracles that happen. And if we don't close our eyes to it, there is hope.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm not even going to add to that because that was a beautiful place to pause. And we're going to continue back in the stripe packets with chapter 4, or the next song, then chapter 4. It's the next page.
Yeah, on page 8, we'll sing together Al Naharot Bavel. Al Naharot Bavel, Al Naharot Bavel, Sham Yashavnu Kam Bachinu, Bezofreinu et Zion, Bezofreinu et Zion, Al Naharot Bavel, Al Naharot Bavel, Sham Yashavnu Kam Bachinu, Bezofreinu et Zion, Bezofreinu et Zion. As we continue now with chapter 4, but not in the Hebrew, but in the Yiddish, as we're in the diaspora, and we're now moving.
I'll read some, and Dr. Erkowitz will read some. Wie es verdunkelt das Gold, verbitten das teure Feingold, die heilige Steine zu Schatten in alle Eckgassen, die teure Kinder von Zion mit Gingold gewogen. Wie seien sie gerechnet für lähmende Krieg, gemacht von a tepperes Hand. A viele Schakalen sind euch die Brust, geben Sogen sehr Junge. Die Tochter, mein Volk, ist an Achser geworden, also wie Streus Vögeln in der Midbar.
Die Zunge von dem Säugendicken ist zugeklebt zu seinen Gummen von Durstigkeit. Kleine Kinder betten Bräut und keiner brecht sie nicht ab. Die, was flecken essen teure Speisen, seinen Wist in die Gassen. Die der Zeugene in Vermillreut tulien sich zu Misthäufens. Warum die Sinn von der Tochter mein Volk ist größer von der Chet von Sturm, was ist übergekehrt geworden wie eine Regge und Händ zumal seinen nicht gefahren auf ihr. Ihre Fürsten seinen gewähnt Leute von Schnee, weißer von Milch, gereutelter auf den Leib von Karellen, Sapirstein sehr Gestalt.
And as the next part of studying will lead into chapter 5, we're going to sing Anima Amin and then connect those other ones. So, on the next page. Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Be'emunah Shelema, Beviat HaMashiach, Beviat HaMashiach, Anima Amin, Ve'af al pi she'in mameach, im gozer Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Be'emunah Shelema, Beviat HaMashiach, Beviat HaMashiach, Anima Amin, Ve'af al pi she'itmameach, im gozer Anima Amin.
On the last page, page 4, is an excerpt from the 5th and final chapter of Echav, Lamentations. While we read verses from the 3rd chapter, which talked about Nechemta, that talked about the quality of hope and consolation, the book of Lamentations is truly of two minds. It ends...
That's all right.
I hope that's not me.
Somebody's mic is acting up.
It's mine. So why don't you just hand me that one?
Yeah, use that. That's a great idea. Wait, it's on, but it's not on. So hold on. Now it's on.
You know, when you don't get union help, this is...
I know, I'd
this
rather
is-
give this off to someone
This is the
else.
result. I mentioned that chapter 3 spoke of hope and consolation, that quality in Aramaic of nechemta, which pretty much all the prophets end up with a note of hope. But Lamentations, because of its connection with the destruction of the temples and other calamities, really has sort of a dual ending. It has the ending that we're going to see here, which should be somewhat familiar to you. And then there is another section that says, even if you have utterly discarded us, your anger against us was very great. There is not a letting go entirely of the pain, the experience of what these verses point to. What we have on the page, though, is verses 21 and 22 from the 5th chapter. And these should be somewhat familiar because we sing them at the end of the Torah service, just before we close the ark. Hashivenu Adonai elecha, God, return us to you, and we shall return. Renew our days as of old. For truly you have rejected us, bitterly raged against us. So which is it, right? Is it hopeful or not? I think even the hope has to be in the context of what has taken place here. I'm interested, there's a number of texts here. The one on the left is, I'll just tell it as a story because it's quicker. There's a midrash that says that this group of rabbis was on the Mount of Olives looking over the destroyed city of Jerusalem, the Second Temple in ruins. And they saw in the ruins some foxes that were coursing in between the clay terrace, all the broken pillars and stones of the temple. And one of the rabbis started to weep. And one of the rabbis started to laugh. And they said to the one who was weeping, "Why are you weeping?" He said, "Well, this is the saddest thing I've ever seen. I mean, the temple, it's destroyed. Our people is exiled. What are we going to do?" And the one who was laughing, they said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Well, just as it was prophesied that the temple, if we didn't get our act together, the temple would be destroyed, so it is also told to us that this covenant with God is unbreakable, and that what we have seen destroyed will be someday repaired." So these two ideas, both of despair and of hope, seem to occur in tandem. A question I have for you, which is not the question at the bottom of the page, is why do you think we sing this at the end of the Torah service? Anybody have an idea? It just was looking at it today, just now, and thinking, it's an interesting context to bring it into. We're returning the Torah to the ark, so that there is some mention of, to bring us back. It's a temporal reference, though, in the text that says, "Bring us back to the days of old." And one thing that is not always understood, but was very common up until the age of the Enlightenment, was that people looked for wisdom in the past. People felt that they were midgets living on the shoulders of giants, and that what was more ancient was more authoritative. We live in a world where it's precisely the opposite. The newest thing, the latest scientific discovery, is what we're clued in on. And it'll be interesting. I heard someone today talking about how not the Renaissance, what did I just call it? Enlightenment, thank you. That the Enlightenment is really under attack culturally by people who reject scientists and expertise and things. It'll be interesting to see what follows from that, and if we do start, just as the poles of the earth are evidently reversing a little bit right now, if we should start looking to the past for answers rather than to the future. We're not there yet. We may not be. But back to the question, what does this have to do with the Torah? Any thoughts? Is that you, Sherry? Do you have a mic? Let me give you one.
Because the Torah has not just the written words, not just a Torah, written Torah, and an oral Torah. And the oral Torah takes the written Torah and adds its wisdom. And if you study, if you look, if you explore, like we have tried to tonight, you can see there are many interpretations. So to renew our days as days of old was when we began to study and kept studying and kept opening the Torah and finding new things in it all the time, along with the ancient wisdom. We could reinterpret the ancient wisdom. We could see how it worked. And the oral Torah, the Talmud, then tried to bring what was in the written Torah up to date, and all the generations of commentary after have often been that kind of inspired resource. And whether you think the inspiration is from God or whether you think the inspiration is just from our own minds, it still is growing and changing, and that renews us.
As our colleague and friend Sherry David Stern once pointed out, the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, it doesn't say God gave the Torah to Moses at Mount Sinai. It says God gave Torah to Moses at Mount Sinai. And that is commonly understood to mean there's more than what the words are on the page. It's the process of taking those ideas and those values and incorporating them in your life. So understanding the Torah as the engine of change may well justify why we would come back to this verse at the end of that service. The hour is growing a little late, so I would like to bring us to a close. By the way, did you know that while it's unclear that the destruction of the temples occurred on the same day, the 9th day of the month of Av, and that all these bad things that are said to have happened on this day, I've always thought of as kind of an interesting curiosity. The truth is that sometimes really bad things did happen on important days. The Nazis began the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto at the first day of Pesach. The combined armies of Egypt and Syria attacked Israel on Yom Kippur. It does seem that our holiest days are sometimes our most vulnerable moments in the eyes of those who would like us to leave. However, there's, I think, another reason why we combine all of these tragedies together and commemorate them on one day. The answer begins with something I got in the mail many decades ago from the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. It was a calendar, like many not-for-profits make calendars to send you. This calendar was unique because on every day of the year, it listed another pogrom, another tragedy, another disaster that Jews had undergone in Europe, in all over the world. It was like one bad news after the other. And for what the Simon Wiesenthal Center was trying to do in fundraising, I understand why they did that. But it struck me as a very un-Jewish way of approaching things. Whereas Tisha B'Av is the Jewish way of creating a container into which we can take those horrific experiences, but limit their impact and dwell in the sadness of those tragedies for a day, but not to allow it to overflow to the point where we have a calendar filled with bad things that happen to good people. I think it's fair to say as well that this operates, we've talked a little bit about the way that Tisha B'Av and confronting these themes works on a personal level as well as a communal level. And the truth is, there I think is more than a subtle suggestion that that's not a bad way of approaching one's own troubles in life, that one has to find a way to contain them so that the sweetness of life can also be felt and experienced. So in the midst of our communal commemoration, I wanted to make that point. And I don't know if you were all intending to, but how about we sing Hashivenu again?
We're going to actually just read the last part of chapter 5, which has Hashivenu, and then
Awesome.
we're going to sing Hashivenu. Yeah. So we're on page 11, and these are the last 3 or 4 verses of chapter 5, which end with the Hashivenu, and then we'll sing Hashivenu.
Ata Adonai leolam teshev, kisacha ledor vador.
O eternal, you remain forever. Your throne is from generation to generation.
Lama lanetzach tishkachenu, ta'azvenu leorech yamim.
Please join if you'd like. Why will you forget us forever and forsake us for so long a time?
Hashivenu Adonai elecha venashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
Turn us unto you, O eternal, and we shall be turned. Renew our days as of old.
Ki immaos meastanu katsavta leinu ad meod.
Can you have rejected us so utterly? Can you be so greatly angry with us?
Hashivenu Adonai elecha venashuva Chadesh yameinu kekedem.
Turn us unto you, O eternal, and we shall be turned. Renew our days as of old. And on the next page. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai elecha venashuva, venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai elecha venashuva, venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem. Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem. Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem.
So, a couple of things before we conclude. One is actually, well, all right, before I make my concluding announcements, we are actually going to say Mourner's Kaddish. Anyone who would like to say Kaddish this evening, we wanted to make sure that you have a chance, Carol. So I'm going to hand this book to you if you'd like the words. And anybody who would like to join in Mourner's Kaddish before we wrap up this evening is certainly welcome to do so. And if you would like to rise, we invite you to rise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divarach erutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayachon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'gala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam le'amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei dekudsha, brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru.
Amen.
May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, to all the world, to which we say,
Amen.
Amen. So as we conclude this evening, I want to certainly thank our cantors for putting together all of the musical parts of this evening, and all of the various choirs and choir people who were involved tonight. My understanding is this was a one rehearsal right before we all began this evening, and it was beautiful. So we are very, very lucky to have so many beautiful voices joining together this evening. And Rabbi Cohen, thank you for putting together our source sheet, and Rabbi Phelps also. It's a group project.
And all of you for helping to lead these discussions.
And also Linda, Jerry, and Dee Dee, thank you for greeting us all this evening. As everybody leaves tonight, your various source sheets, music sheets, you are welcome to keep them. And if you don't want them, you can return them to the shelf right where you came in. And there's also a basket on the name tag table if you're wearing a name tag to return them. You don't have to try and put them in any kind of an order. There's literally a basket to just put them in there on your way out of the sanctuary. Anything else I'm forgetting? I hope not. I hope that everyone has a meaningful rest of the holiday. Are we doing another song? Or are we?
We can either conclude with Biado or we can leave it right
We can
as-
conclude with Biado.
It's not very long. We'll do it.
Okay.
So that's on
Okay.
page 13.
Last page.
בידו הפקיד רוחי בעת אישן וירא ועם רוחי גוויתי אדוני לי ולא אירא ועם רוחי גוויתי Adonai li velo ira. My soul I give to you, my spirit in your care. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Hold me in your hand. Draw me near, I shall not fear. Safely in your hand. Beyado afkid ruchi, be'ed vishan ve'ayra, ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li velo ira, ve'im ruchi geviati, Adonai li velo ira. An easy fast if you're having a fast.
Yes, have a meaningful and easy fast if you are fasting, and a meaningful holiday. And thank you for being here this evening.